Global Software Development, Chapter 20. We are going to discuss various issues as it relates to distance. As you know, most of the projects these days are handled either nationally or internationally. So we have the issue, is the project is really co-located? Usually means people within, walking distance of each other or in the same building, or is it in multi-site? And if it's multi-site, is it in multiple countries? That is extremely popular these days. We have companies who have branches all over the place, whether in the US, in India, in China, and at the same time, people are working on different locations. There was once I was visiting a friend at Yahoo. He was managing an IT and he was a director there. And I visited his office. And there was only 6 people working there. So I asked him, where are they? He said, well, he has a group in Bangalore, India. He has a group in Salt Lake City, US. So they were all different kinds of places. So as we want to talk about this. Now, remember, this is an IT management class. How do you manage a team? And you're not in the same building, right? When you're in the same building, you could always call meetings. You have a designated meeting room. You have face to face, etc. Even if some people work from home, you could have a meeting on Fridays. They come there. But what do you do when people are all over the place? You have a group that's in India, and which is 10, 12 hours difference. A group in China, 14 hours difference. How do you handle these things when it's day here, there's a night there? So there's a lot of advantages and disadvantages, but we have to know. So this chapter is focusing on this. But really, the main issue is how to overcome distance in global projects. So extremely important is these 3 dimensions: communication, coordination, control. So we're going to focus this chapter on these. First of all, there are always pros and cons, right? A lot of people always talk about, is it good to have global or is it not? I personally think the benefit outweighs the disadvantages. First of all, you could work around the clock, 24 hours, as it says, cost saving. Why? Because probably the cost of a top developer in India or in China is far less than one in New York, or even Dallas is less than, for example, California. So this is definitely big cost saving. Another one, faster delivery, what they call it, follow the sun, right? You work in the US, you go home, and at the exact same time, people in China are waking up, or people in India, in the midday, you're finishing, they're starting, and also a large pool of developers. Why just limit to the development in a small group in your locality while you could have a pool across the world? And of course, better modularization too. You could have a group handle one part. For example, you could have a group in Bangalore, a specialist in web development, while a group in Boston will be maybe Android development, and a group in, say, Beijing will be the testing part. So you could modularize things, and there's little proof, however, that these advantages materialize. I think it does, but there hasn't been a lot of collective data with it. It's just intuitive, it makes sense. Okay. Now, this is extremely important slide here, chapter slide 4. What are the challenges? First, I want you to pay attention onto this. On the top part, distance. When I say distance, most of you think about kilometers or miles or, physical distance. But distance, there are actually 3 dimensions to distance. One, we call it temporal, which means of time, related to the time. For example, it is 10 a.m. here in Dallas. At the same time, for example, it is 12 at night in Bangalore, or it is 8 a.m. in China. It's exact same moment, but different time difference. Even in the US, you have, for example, 2 hour time difference between Dallas and Los Angeles. So that is one. The next one is geographical, right? That's the most obvious one. That's the meter kilometer distance, right? How far are you from each other? But remember, sometimes geographical and temporal could match or not. For example, from Dallas to, say, Calgary, Canada, there is no time difference because they're vertical on top of each other. So same time, exactly 10 a.m. here is 10 a.m. there, but the distance is thousands of miles. So even though we have thousands of miles, the time is the same. And the most complicated one is called sociocultural. This is the one that has our culture is the distance, right? The way you view things, the way urgency means different thing to different people. Okay, so our cultures, we deal things differently. So that's also a distance. For example, a person from China versus from India versus from US versus from Europe, they have a different view toward things. So now we have this as distance. So these are the dimensions for distance. And we also talked about dimension for management, right? So you're a manager, you have to communicate with people, right? You have to, have meetings and tell them what to do, what have you done, a status reports. You have to coordinate, right? Who does what kind of work? Are you complete? It's your turn to do this, and of course, control of these. Okay, you've been allocated to do these Android pages. Are you done? Are you not done? Because without control, nothing means anything, right? It's kind of like I say, speed limit on the highway. It's basically the coordination, but the main thing that makes it valid is the control. If there's no police checking on the speed of the cars, speed limit means nothing. So the same thing, if you don't have a mechanism for control, for example, imagine you're a manager in the US and you have a group, say in Bangalore. How do you know they're even at work today? I mean, you really don't know because you're not there to check on them, right? So that is why we have to sort of look at these things. So basically, I want to show you something here real quick. See, okay, for some reason, okay, so these are all important. I was just going to tell you, for some reason on the video, it doesn't show the axis, but all of these really matter. So you have to look at every one of these under one of these. And there's different things we have to do. For example, how do you do communication in the temporal manner, right? Well, we have two forms of communication. One we call it async and one we call it sync. Sync means face to face, right? We're synchronous. You're sitting there, or if I send you an email, you write, get it. Asynchronous means, like I said, an email. I may send you an email, you may not open it until tomorrow. So we have to have different remedies for different one of these. So I want to talk about this. So under temporal distance, so I'm going to look at in each one of these and I'm going to analyze these. So I'm going to first look at the temporal, see how do I communicate, how do I control, coordinate and control. Then I'm going to look at the geographical and see what I do, and also sociocultural. Okay, so temporal communication. Well, being effective, okay, asynchronous is less effective. That means asynchronous means you're not face to face or you're not at the same time zone. So 8 a.m. here, 10 p.m. there. So it's very different. And as you can see, you're much more effective in a face to face meeting, or even a meeting that, for example, Skype, which you're really face to face but virtually, as opposed to, for example, taping a video, okay, and send it. Just look at this lecture. It would have been nicer if I was actually, the best way would have been face to face. If I would deliver the lecture to you, that's absolute synchronous, right? Because you're sitting right there. Why is that advantage? You could ask your questions right there. You understand the gesture. You're in the mood of the class. Well, the middle one probably would have been synchronous, but in a virtual way. For example, at the exact same time that I'm giving you a lecture, you're watching the lecture, but you're not seeing, face to face. You're, for example, we're on Teams meeting or on Zoom. Somehow you're watching me. You still could, ask question. You could raise your hand, but you don't get the feel of it. You don't see other students. You don't get the full dimension. But it's not bad. And another case is, of course, the way we handle the class. It's asynchronous. So I tape videos and I post it, and then you listen to it at your convenience. Well, it has benefits that you could watch it at your own, but it also has disadvantages. It's very difficult to ask questions, etc. So sync, async, and somewhere in between. Coordination. Cost is larger, right? Because when you need to coordinate things, if everybody's there, you just meet. But what if a group is in Boston? You're the IT manager. You have to travel there a lot. It's simple. I recall from my corporate days, a simple, say, half a day job. You needed to go set up some items, discuss some budgets, sign some papers, and assign some tasks. do some meetings. Probably you could have done the whole thing in one day, maybe 3, 4 meetings. This would have cost $6,000 or $7,000, right? Because I had to book airlines, I had to leave a day early, I had to be in a hotel the night before, then I was there. In the evening, I stay in the hotel, and then the next day I'll go. So you're talking about round trip airfare, at least 2 nights in the hotel, at least 5 or 6 meals, transportation, or you renting a car. So all of these, extremely costly, something that in the office would have almost cost nothing if you were face to face. Now you have to spend a lot of money, and that's a big cost driver in the companies. They call it T&E, travel and entertainment. T for travel, E for entertainment. Well, travel, of course, is the airline. Entertainment is it's a fake name. It's not really an entertainment, but you have to stay in the hotel because in the morning you have to go to the office. You have to eat at night, so that's they call it E for entertainment. Okay. Some company call it, just general expense reporting, but T&E usually means when you're on the road, as opposed to expense report, because you could be at home have expense report, but T&E typically indicates that you are leaving your base to travel to another place. What are your controls? A lot of delays. Okay. I need to check something, but I have to wait until you're there, right? Between here and say Beijing, there's 14 hours of time difference. I have to wait. So if I send an email, let's say at say 10 a.m. in the morning, okay, it's 12 midnight there, right? And nobody's there in the office, so I have to wait until probably somebody goes there 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. And by the time they send it back to me, I'm not there because it's 6 or 7 p.m. I've gone home. So then I have to wait till the next morning. So just a simple email or communication could take a couple of days. So tons of delays. So wait for the sort of next teleconferencing meeting or send emails and wait and so forth. Okay. Now, the second dimension, geographical. No, this is the physical distance. How do we handle communication, coordination, and control? Okay. Communication, effective information exchange, for example, less informal exchange, different languages, different human knowledge, build a team, more of a cohesive, them and us feelings, and the trust is an issue. Because you're not there. I've actually worked for companies, we have had different locations, and say the location from Boston and Dallas, they feel you're not even part of the same company. You always refer to them as them. Oh, the guys in Dallas, or the guys in Salt Lake, or the guys in Bangalore. They're part of the same company. Why are you referring to them as an us? But it's just a natural feel. They say since you are not there, it feels like you're not part of a team. They say always when you're away, people start forgetting you or thinking you as a stranger. And information exchange is also a lot less informal. Okay. It's really nicer. Remember, informal communication, just to let you know, we have two types of communication, formal and informal. Formal communication is when you put things on email and, all the reports and all of those. Informal is when you carry the message with your tone, the way you talk. It's a funny example. Remember when you were a kid, when your dad looked at you, you kind of knew you're in trouble. Right? That's informal communication. Or if they smile at something you did, wow, I did really well. So informal communication is very effective, right? Because when you see your boss and is very happy, shakes your hand, or when he says a sort of a soft comment, that's informal, as opposed to, right, this person has done really well, etc. So unfortunately, informal communication is very powerful and sort of goes away. Also, you have to be very careful. Certain things that might be acceptable in your regionality may not be acceptable in other regions. You have to be very careful with the comments you may make, because it could offend the culture versus not offensive in another culture. So when you write formal communication, you have to get sort of the base that's common with everyone. So you really become extremely mathematical, very scientific in writing, which is good, but it takes the human aspects of management away. Remember, management is really a lot of humanities about understanding people. In the next chapter, I'm going to talk about some of the managing people issues. So the way you talk to two employees is different, right? For example, employee A might be a younger 24-year-old versus employee number two might be a 55-year-old. The lingo is different. But in formal communication, everything is pretty much same for everybody. So coordination. So we have what's called task awareness and sense of urgency. Okay. When you task awareness is sort of a shared mental model, and sense of urgency is also a perception. When you're in different location, perception feels different. For example, it is funny in Dallas, for example, people are not as urgent than people in New York. In New York, if you delay a little bit, people get really annoyed. Get done with it. Versus in Dallas is a little more calm. Now you could get much more calmer if you ever go to, for example, some of the I don't know, Jamaica. We had taken a trip there, and it was really nice, relaxing day. And I ordered, a drink by the pool, and there was nobody there. It was kind of early in the day, and this took this guy 25 minutes to bring me a drink. Now in Dallas, people will wait 5 minutes. In New York, 2 minutes. But I didn't expect. There's nobody here. Why is it taking that long? And then when he came, I thought, wow, why did it take so long? He says, relax, man, chill. You're here to relax. After 10 days being in Jamaica, my expectation dropped. Like when I ordered something, I didn't expect it in 2 minutes. I expected it in 30 minutes. So a sense of urgency is really perception. It's really by your locality. If you live in a fast-paced location in a different sort of region, the perception is different. You have to be more speedy versus some places are more relaxed. Now that's a problem for management, because what if a task is urgent, and you tell people, say in Jamaica, to do this for you? The guy said, "Oh, cool, I'll get it done in the next 6 months." Right? You want it the next 6 days. So this is where I would say you have to make sure you have enough control, which means accurate status information, uniform process. So this is, if you don't do this one, you're in trouble. So tracking, blaming, for example, you tell people, listen, this needs to be done in 6 days. Doesn't matter you're in New York, Jamaica, or Dallas, right? You have to have the same throughput, okay? And uniform process. So you might have tools, different tools to help you with this uniform process, because it is true that we are in different locality, but ideally you need to have the same outcome. As a manager, I need to deliver something to the customer. I don't care whether it gets done in Bangalore, Jamaica, or in China, or in the US. It has to be done by this time, because I have to send it for testing and eventually ship it to the customer. So you have to have a very uniform process and control, and that becomes very mechanical, which is not as good. Remember, every time you become very mechanical, management loses its oomph, its ability to do things. Good managers are good speakers. Good managers can talk to different people in different languages. Remember, we call it carrots and sticks. I'll talk more about it in the next chapter. A little bit more on the geographical distance, which is mileage and kilometer difference. You have to be aware of a few things. One, we call it activity awareness. What are they doing on the other location? Because they're not in the same place. Availability, are they even there? Process awareness. What are they doing right now? Okay. And perspective awareness. What are the other thinking and why? For example, when you're in your office, you could sense if your people are unhappy or happy or under pressure, or if there's a holiday or vacation comes, they know what the expectation is. But do you know that for the remote locations? For example, you might be in the US managing a group, say in India, but how do you know if there's a local holiday coming? I've seen people, there was a Chinese holiday in February, their New Year, and the person had set up a meeting for that exact same moment. I mean, it wouldn't be awful for you as an employee in Beijing having to attend on your New Year because of this lack of awareness, right? So these are a lot of things that we have to do this one. So the last one, I would say, is the most difficult one, is called socioculture. Our communication, for example, we have a lot of cultural misunderstanding, okay? Have you heard it says lost in translation? What you mean might be interpreted differently by other people. Even simple terms. I worked in Ireland, Dublin, Ireland for a while, a couple of years. part of the same company I was working, and certain wordings, certain things meant different things. For example, in the US, if you say something is, I remember I was at a dinner at a place, and they said, "How's the food? Are you happy with it?" That's always quite good. So when you say quite good in the US, typically means very good. Okay, we appreciate it. In Ireland, if you say it's quite good, that means it barely meets the standard. It's just edible. Okay, I didn't know that. The moment I said that, after a little while, somebody started frowning. I said, "Did I say something bad?" I said, "Quite good means I barely tolerate it." So this is a lot of things that you have to make sure. You may say things to people, they take it the wrong way, versus in another location, it might be a positive thing, someplace might be a negative thing. Also, coordination, okay, effectiveness, vocabulary, communication style. It's kind of like when you talk to this group of people, you have to use a different tone than the other one. So you really don't know, especially since you don't know their culture. For example, when you talk to people, certain places, I'll tell you, Asian countries, China, India, Iran, they're very respect oriented. You have to always respect the elderly, respect the management. This is just what it is. By the virtue of somebody's older than you, you naturally respect them. I don't think that's the case in the US. In the US, it's more a status. Your boss might be much younger than you, but the level of respect is there, versus, so age doesn't play any different issue on it. So that is why it's a problem. I remember I was, when the first time I became a manager was in my 30s, and I had people in the group who were in their 50s, late 50s, okay? And then I had people in the group who were in their 20s. And then the way I was trained, that age doesn't really matter. But then all of a sudden, I had to do the same thing in another country, and all of a sudden, expectation was that I had to be age aware. So these are some of the things that's really part of the sociocultural items. Also, the last thing we call it control, quality, and expertise. So we have this thing called capability maturity level 5, does not even guarantee quality. Okay. In socioculture, we cannot even say, can you even control this sociocultural aspect? It's very, very difficult. It's you can't. This is something almost undoable in these aspects. So let's talk about national culture. This is just the funniest slide, but it gets you the message, right? For example, this is, they call it American managers. And this is, we call it, let's say, have a hamburger style of management. What does that mean? They start with the sweet talk, which is the top one. Then the criticism is slipped in, it's the meat. Finally, the encourage, which is the bottom one. So if the meat is to give them a message, hey, you're not performing well, keep it up, they first sugarcoat it. Hey, what you need to do is, you're really good, you're a valued employee, you've been here for many years, we appreciate you being here. But then you slip in the sort of the meat to say, by the way, you haven't been performing that well, blah, blah, blah. We are not very happy with you. But then at the end, you're going to say, hey, we look forward to having you here for many, many more years, etc. So you kind of sort of sugarcoat things because it's much easier. Now, let me show you another culture here. With the Germans, all you get is meat, right? You walk in, no sugarcoating at the beginning. It says, you're awful. You're supposed to do this. You didn't get this thing done. You must get this thing done or else, right? But that's just the style. It's the same thing. Really, the message is the same. But the way we are brought up, or the culture, is this. So imagine if an American works with a German group, or a German works with an American. A German may say, why are you beating around the bush so much? Just get to it. An American says, why are you so harsh? Right? So this is something. Now with the Japanese, all one gets is the bun. You just have to smell the meat. You go to your boss's office, they just look at you. If they're unhappy with you, it's just a dirty look, all you're gonna get. Right? So you're gonna know, oh my God, my boss is not very happy with me. So it's all the sociocultural aspects of things. So I want to talk about what's called Hofstede dimensions. So this is basically a dimension that talks about communication in 5 dimensions. One is called power distance, one is called collectivism versus individualism, femininity versus masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, and also long-term versus short-term, basically orientation. So let's talk a little bit about the first of all, powerlessness. By the way, I have a video that relates to this one, and we need to complete that video as well. Let's see here. I'm going to pause here, and there's a video that talks about Hofstede dimension. So I want you to first watch that Hofstede dimension video, which is going to be posted. And then when we come back, I will continue as far as that one, because that, I want you to first watch it. If you don't watch the video, it may feel a little bit disjoint. It may feel that it's there. So let's just go ahead and stop this one, and I'll call this one the first half of the chapter. When we come back, we'll continue and we do the second portion of the chapter, starting from Hofstede dimensions.